The infatuation with serial killers is one of the most complex human phenomena that we have. Coined the Bonnie and Clyde syndrome, there still remains a lack of research into why this exists or how many people have it, or more correctly known as hybristophilia. However, today we won't be focusing on the psychology of that, but instead on why Evan Peters was the perfect casting choice for such an odd-looking and vile character in the Jeffrey Dahmer Chronicle. On top of the mental preparation actors go through to play such a fringe role, casting directors actively seek out someone who shares a lot of the same facial features as the character that they're trying to portray. It makes a lot of sense, wouldn't it? Why are some of these particular features, though, seen as less trustworthy? Why do some people just appear frightening? And why was Evan Peters chosen for this role? Thornhill and Gangster 1999, as well as other researchers in the field, show that youth is a clear factor in someone appearing attractive. Now, the American Society of Plastic Surgeons also noted that over 5 million operations to reduce wrinkles were performed in 2010 alone, and this number has greatly increased in 2020. We already have discussed the halo effect ad nauseum, where in this case, if you look younger and more attractive, people tend to attribute positive personality traits like trustworthiness to you. Sutherland et al.'s experiments also show strong associations between youthfulness and attractiveness. This goes for both men and women, where their spectrum of trustworthiness is judged basically from male to female. In a sense, the older and more masculine you appear, the less trustworthy you are said to be as well. Evan, in this case, has a notable amount of frown lines and folds on his face, especially as he's gotten older. First, he has clear nasolabial folds, tear troughs, mental creases, labiomental folds, all of which are aging signs. The most striking similarity between him and Jeffrey Dahmer, however, is the creasing above the chin region. The mentolabial groove is the indent between the chin and the lips, also called the sulcus. If it's too deep, it can cue into malocclusion or an overgrown chin, or the overuse of the chin muscle itself. This is why facial harmony in this region matters a lot, because it's very sensitive and we use it as an indicator to look for other structural or facial anomalies. Disney is not typically going to cast a villain with a harmonious face, and that's why most Disney villains have a funny look to them, and I've explained this in the previous video that this is a very deliberate choice. They will also have some, for example, hyperdivergent features that break into the realm of uncanniness and are sometimes considered unpleasant to look at. Using the Disney example, we used the case of Extreme Scleral Show to make it look like those characters, those Disney villains, are going through some kind of madness. In this case, however, Evan's chin region is not too abnormal, but people with this condition will opt for either filler or chin augmentation to make that indent less pronounced. While Evan doesn't have frown lines, his face lacks a lot of the indicators of youth. Now, obviously, he is 35, so that is to be expected. Even though Evan overall doesn't appear to be old, those small signs of aging contribute to a scarier, more demeaning appearance. The same can also be said about the eye bags and dark circles and the infraorbital darkening, which I would guess is just makeup. Next question is, do certain features appear scarier than others? And we did cover this video. This was quite long ago with the case of Richard Ramirez, where there was some circumstantial research that pointed towards Richard Ramirez having basically a more intimidating, scarier looking face than somebody with a softer, rounder face with softer features. But in this case, there are actual features that we can talk about. The eyes, for example, are the most revealing facial feature. And after all, a lot of our emotions are expressed through the brow and eyelid movement. An example would be frown lines, like we touched on earlier. The act of furrowing one's brows signals worry or anger. It's not a normal reaction you'd have. It's not a neutral facial expression. In the same way, raising one's chin displays disgust, and this is perhaps one contributor to a chin crease or having frown lines, both of which are characterized on Dahmer's face. There is, however, a difference between these emotionally driven changes in soft tissue and hard tissue features, like the brow ridge protrusion. Certain facial features are set in stone. Things like your eyebrow position, facial width, mid-face shortness, they all have strong links to personality traits, or more correctly, because of these facial features, we tend to look at people with them in different ways. If you examine the most common serial killers or the film depictions of them, you're going to find eyebrows that are generally closer to the eyes and also high eyebrow tilt or upturn along with it. This is most easily identifiable as predatory, a predatory feature because it is meant to induce fear in others. That's not the actual evolutionary reason, but it's more so called facial buttressing. It's just meant to protect the face. But For personality and social sake, we'll just say these are scary looking features. In a past video, we discussed how looking intimidating can also be beneficial. So there's no direct evolutionary link, but socially there can be some links to looking scary because it scares off supposedly other men. But if you take to the extreme, the eye area can also look too intimidating, even jarring at some points. In this case, Evan's whole eye area, the periocular region, is the perfect match for such a role of, well, a cannibalistic serial killer. He has the eyebrows that are as close as possible to the eyes, so a low pretarsal distance, and along with that, his eyebrows are quite upturned. Research by Alexander Todorov, an assistant professor of psychology at Princeton University, depicted that angrier and more dominant faces are seen as being lower trust. The eyebrows pointing down at the center is arguably the most notable difference between a high trust and a low trust face. At the opposite end, having two baby-like features, very neotenous childlike features, such as further apart eyes and brows, also make a face look, as you would guess, less dominant. Evan's lighter brow color and thinner brows also contributed to making him look older, like we discussed before. And eyebrows help frame the face, so a lack thereof can actually lead to a less youthful, uncanny appearance, because as you age, your brows start to thin and even get lighter. You can also combine that with Evan's upper eyelid exposure, or the pretarsal show, and other signs of aging and dark circles, and you get just about the most intimidating, or uncanny, it would be a better way of putting it, eye area that most faces might have. He also has a bit of scleral show, or the white underneath the eyes. Now, Evans is not excessive, but even the small amounts he have give him an uncaring appearance. Lorenzo Zurzolo is a good example of this. There are some other facial features we can talk about in contributing to the cannibalistic serial killer look. Now, a longer philtrum is also a similar feature that's seen between Evan and Dahmer, so that one is a good match there. The longer subnasal region also makes Evan's midface look quite short, along with breaking harmony once again. This is a more masculinizing feature. Men typically have shorter midfaces and wider faces. Masculine facial features are usually harsher, while feminine features are softer, or the biological terms would be robust and gracile. And I've explained that on the TikTok, so if you don't follow us on TikTok, you should probably go there as well. But think of someone like Thanos or any hyper-intimidating animated character with incredibly high facial robusticity. They usually give them a caricatured midface. And if you think about it, a shorter nose and midface will also make the jaw look taller and more menacing in comparison. And that's, again, Thanos' pretty much entire face. Obviously, Evan's midface is not quite as exaggerated because he is a human, but these subtle differences really do change how our faces are perceived. Facial width to height ratio is another one of those things that affect how dominant or aggressive our face appears. Now, there is a decent amount of evidence that points towards this being a real thing, but there's also evidence that points towards it not being as strong as we might think. Wider faces do result in more masculine appearances, and Evan does lean towards a square face shape. His jaw region is not too angular or squared, but his face shape is certainly more wide and compact, with his face being 2 times wider than his midface height, which is generally a very masculinizing indicator. Research by Stirrat and Perret seems to confirm this theory, showing how men with greater facial width were more likely to exploit others and less likely to be trusted. There is not a large amount of research on trustworthiness and facial features, so we'll leave it at that, but it is plain that a more aggressive looking face is going to be perceived as being less trustworthy. Whether it is less trustworthy or not trustworthy would be pseudoscience, but the perception of it is all that matters. And that's probably why in the show, Glenda, and even in real life, didn't really trust Jeffrey Dahmer. Most of those types of features result from testosteronic development, prenatal testosteronic development, meaning that the more masculine a face appears, the more it tends to look aggressive and intimidating. If you look at the faces of the world's strongest men, they tend to have hyperdimorphic faces, upturned eyebrows, short and wide mid-faces, very robust facial features. Although facial dimorphism is one of the most well-researched components of facial attractiveness, there can be such thing as too much of a good thing. So to round out an otherwise very technical analysis of 2 different faces, Evan is the glamorized version of a character he is portraying. He is an actor after all. He doesn't have caricatural levels of facial harmony, nor does he lie at the extreme ends of facial dimorphism. Overall, he has an attractive face which uniquely lends itself to the nature of this kind of role. sharing similarities with Zac Efron being cast as Ted Bundy. A hypothetical villain of such proportions should look really frightening. Think of William Dafoe as the Green Goblin. However, in some cases there are good-looking criminals. Evan's face maintains the perfect blend of some intimidating facial features, strong facial harmony, and high facial dimorphism, but not as high as the real Jeffrey Dahmer's. None of those features venture to the extreme, but he can still convincingly play a serial killer because of structural components like the longer philtrum or the shorter mid-face. Those are things that makeup cannot do, and that's why a casting director has to look at the look, the quote-unquote the look that some people have, an actor might have, to actually be given the part. It's because of this that it only takes a little bit of effort in makeup and styling, such as giving him an aged appearance through nasolabial lines and forehead creases, for him to really look the part. He also has experience playing other similar violent roles, and he displayed blatant psychopathic traits playing Tate Langdon in American Horror Story. So this guy is a very skilled actor, and it's not surprising that he absolutely did justice to the despicableness of the role. His pale skin tone in this role really does create the soullessness of the outward appearance. That doesn't mean that Evan Peters necessarily always has to play violent roles, but throughout his career as an actor, he certainly does a good job of it because of structural facial features that money cannot buy, or more correctly, you cannot get with makeup alone. And that's certainly by no coincidence. That being said, if you'd like to get your face analyzed like Evan Peters and see if there's things that you can work on, then you can get a analysis over at the Coos website by our team of doctors and dentists. You can follow us on our socials for more content, and if you want to learn how to do this type of stuff yourself or you want to learn more about it, then you can watch the Defining Beauty playlist.